So, I have published a second lecture on D2L. You can find it in two places. If you look at the news feed on D2L, you can find it there, or you can also find it under the content tab if you want to watch the video for this class. So, we were talking about, last time we left off, according to my notes, and I hope I'm correct, talking about reductio ad absurdum, is that correct?
Yeah.
And so what we see is we find like this parade of horribles argument being used a lot of times, and I think that they use leaps in logic. And really it's an accumulation of either denying the antecedent or affirming the consequent that you find when they engage in this, and so they do it poorly, but you're going to see a lot of this being done, particularly in the political marketplace as we approach the general election, which is when for president. Yesterday was 1 year to the day, and we will what? What will happen 1 year from yesterday?
Isn't it the inauguration?
It will be the inauguration of the new president of the United States. And so in the political marketplace, we're seeing a lot of activity right now and a lot of back and forth from the candidates particularly, and the rhetoric, and you see a lot of reductio ad absurdum in those types of political marketing. For example, on the Second Amendment, Donald Trump has now got Sarah Palin who came out and endorsed him. I think we talked about that last time. And of course, instantly after she endorsed him, she had to go do what? And this is a really good thing for, the NRA. Because right after she endorsed Donald Trump and he talked about how bad it was that the Obama administration was attacking the Second Amendment, her son was arrested for getting drunk and beating up his girlfriend while pointing an AK-47 or something at. So we're going to hear a lot of, the arguments, and they use a lot of these types of reductio ad absurdum arguments in those. Deductive arguments in several steps, you might want to look at that. Composing your argumentative essay for what you will do for the article review and the group project, and for the essay portions of the two exams that will be taken. You want to explore all sides of the argument. And in this class, what that's going to mean is we're going to talk about some various theories and the application and interface between, for example, marketing theories and philosophical ethical theories. And each of those philosophical ethical theories will have different perspectives, and there are even some challenges that we'll talk about. And so when you think about these fact patterns that will be presented to you in this class, you want to think about how each of these theories would face or deal with the question that is asked in the essay. How each of the different theories applies to the issues that you're going to look at in your article review and your group project, and how that applies. So we talked about this methodology, we talked about the IRAC method last time, didn't we?
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about the issues, and a lot of articles are going to have more than one issue. If Apple releases a new product, it's not just about the release of the product. Apple, when they released the iPhone 6, actually impacted by something like 0.1%, which is pretty big for one company to affect 0.1% of the GDP of the United States when they released the iPhone 6. So you think about these issues, the rules that apply to them. So we're going to talk about, deontological ethics, teleological ethics, virtue ethics, moral minimums, how those rules, that each of those would apply to the issues, and then the application. And then a conclusion. How each of those apply, and so exploring all of these sides of the argument, being able to think about what would be the counter-argument. In many instances, the counter-argument to the issues that you're going to be looking at is going to be the opposite ethical theory. There's a big difference between deontological theory and utilitarian theory in the way that they're going to analyze the situation. Question: defend each of your premises, each of your arguments' premises. Revise and rethink your arguments as you go through this process. That's always important. One of the things that I know you don't do that you should, as you think about planning and writing, is developing an outline and how you should structure those things, because if you do the outline first, you can then modify and play around with the outline without actually writing all of the body. How many of you actually outline before you start to write? Or how many of you just sit down and start spewing forth?
I kind of make up an outline in my head.
You gotta make an outline in your head.
Not as good as the real thing probably.
And
but,
then start
just,
typing it out.
Yeah, I kind of have a game plan going.
When I was younger, I will tell you that when I was your age and an undergraduate, I didn't outline because my brain, I probably have suffered from ADHD, and my brain just raced so fast that I just wanted to get it all out, and so I just would sit down and start typing, which led to having to revise a lot because it wasn't necessarily, it was lots of, flashes of brilliance. One person said, Voltaire, do you all know who Voltaire is? His most famous work is Candide. I'll talk about Candide in here. He thought of himself as a philosopher, but he really wasn't. He was more of a public intellectual, but they said his mind was a chaos of clear ideas. And that's perhaps how my mind was when I was an undergraduate. It just raced so quickly, and I would just start writing things down, and then I'd have to go back and revise it because it just would maybe, might have been flashes of brilliance, or maybe it was just dribble, I don't know, but it was incoherent in many respects because I didn't sit there and outline. As you get older, you probably get less quick, and so you begin to outline and you realize that that does have some advantages. There are differences in terms of the type of skills that are required for different types of academics. Did you know that if you're a mathematician, that they make their mark in their 20s? If you don't become a great mathematician in your 20s, you're probably never going to become a great mathematician because your mind races so quickly. That's what's required to be a really good theoretical physicist or mathematician. Historians don't make their mark until when, do you suppose? Most historians don't make their mark until they're in their 50s or 60s. Well, what's the difference there in thinking about this? Why would mathematicians, why would they have to do it in their 20s? And historians don't make their mark until they're in their 60s. What do you think the difference is? I think to do theoretical physics or mathematics, to do theoretical math, you really need that fast processing. For history, you need what? You need perspective. You don't need fast processing, you need perspective. And so there is a difference. But rethink your arguments and replay them out, and that will maybe help, and outlining will do that. Composing your essay, explain the question. Don't assume, and this is something that I do in my own writing that my mother constantly reminds me of. My mother was an English teacher, and so as I write my academic articles, which are required for us to maintain academic scholarly standing at the college and to keep our jobs here, I have my mother read my work, and she often says, I don't understand this. I use terms that are not in everyday use, and so don't assume that your audience knows more than they do. Don't assume that because you sort of become an expert in this area or your article review because you're the one that read it that we know. For example, if you're doing an article on technology and you start talking about platforms, and what is a platform in terms of technology? How does that differ from maybe what a platform is that we understand in the everyday world? What is a platform? How many of you have had MIS? You do have to take an MIS class, right? How many of you have had it? So what is a platform?
It's been a while.
It's what?
It's been a while.
It's been a while. If I say platform in an ordinary sense, what is a platform?
Structure to stand on.
Yeah, it's a raised, above everything else that you stand on. What is a platform in computers?
What everything runs on.
Yeah, it's the operating system. I'm sure that the people in MIS are horrified at my oversimplification of their discipline there. So, for example, in the company that I work for, we built learning management systems, and we would advertise that it worked on across all platforms, including iOS, Windows, and Linux, because there are still some school systems out there that use Linux. Make a definitive claim or proposal. I find that students do this, again, because we go back to the I don't like to argue. They tell me what argument they might make, they dance around the argument, they don't actually make a definitive claim. Don't be mealy-mouthed, make a claim, make an argument. Don't hem and haw around it. I know that some of you do it because what you are hoping for, and particularly on the essay portions of the exam, that if you just throw enough stuff out there, you think that you can BS your way through an answer. And so if I just throw enough out there, it will stick. But you need to make definitive claims. Develop your arguments fully and consider objections, and of course consider alternatives. Composing your essay, keep your thesis brief. One of the things that I got an article back from a journal that I sent off, and one of the reviewers said that a journal article shouldn't be like a mystery novel, like an Agatha Christie, where there's more red herrings than are in the entire sea. You should have some idea of where you're going. So keep the introduction and thesis brief, and then develop it in the body, your points in the body. Clarify, and then let's talk about the fallacies in chapter 10 of the rule book. The two great fallacies: generalizing from incomplete information. This has a specific fallacy that goes along with it, and it goes along with the correlation doesn't necessarily equal causation, and it's called post hoc ergo propter hoc, which literally means in Latin, because of this, therefore that. And we oftentimes engage in this fallacy of generalizing from incomplete information. And the other is overlooking alternatives. And these two great fallacies, of course, are interrelated, and we find people doing them generally together in a lot of situations. The ad hominem, what you should know for the final exam, some of these terms: the ad hominem attack, attacking the person rather than their qualifications. No sensitive person thanks X. Ad ignorantum, an appeal to ignorance. During the McCarthy hearings, Senator McCarthy, would label people as communists. And the older version of the text, I don't know if your current version has this, but ad ignorantum, the appeal to ignorance, when he was asked for evidence to back up his accusation that someone was a communist, he says, I don't have much information on this except the general statement from the FBI that there's nothing in the files to disprove his communist connections. Well, it's a fallacy, and also at the law in this country, we believe you're what? You're innocent until proven guilty. Ad misericordiam, this is the one that you will do at the end of the semester. Anybody graduating senior? Oh, maybe I can learn that for you. The ad misericordiam appeal. I know I didn't attend your classes, I didn't buy the book or read it, but I really need to get a C so that I pass, because I'm going to graduate, and if I don't, my student loans are going to come due and I'll be living in a box. I actually had a student tell me this one time. She said, you gave me an F in your class, and unless you change it to a C, I'm going to be thrown off of financial aid, and I rely on financial aid for my living expenses because she was taking out student loans. And she said, I'll be thrown out of my apartment on Wednesday, the water will be cut off on Thursday, the electricity on Friday. And I said, well, why do you care about those things if you're being thrown out on Wednesday when the others are being cut out? And I'll be living in my car in boxes on Saturday. Sorry, no, not my fault that you didn't come to class. The ad populum, appealing to the emotions of the crowd, going along with it. Everybody is doing it. And of course your parents came back with this argument with what? You need to agree to the ad, when you start with the ad populum type arguments as to why you should be able to do something. Well, Mom, everybody's doing it. And they would come back with, what's the, yeah, if everyone was jumping off the bridge, would you jump off the bridge? Well, I don't know. What's under the bridge? How high is the bridge? I might jump off the bridge. Could be fun, depending on what's below it. We talked about affirming the consequent and denying the antecedent, begging the Christian, implicitly using your conclusion as a premise, which I talked about. I've actually had a student tell me this before when I was talking about the Bible in this class. And one of the things that we'll talk about is religious absolutism as a basis for ethics. And they've actually argued that God exists because it says so in the Bible, which is true because God wrote it after all. And I actually had students tell me that was correct. God did not sit down at the cosmic word processor and pound out the Bible, did he? Or she? Is that what happened? The Bible is the Word of God through the words of man speaking in the idiom of his time. And so God didn't sit down and, you can claim that it was divinely inspired, but God didn't sit down and pound it out at the cosmic dome. Equivocation. Don't do that. Using a word in more than one sense, we talked about that with the men and women example. Poisoning the well. I see people do this one a lot, particularly in advertising in sort of a backhanded way. They poison the well against maybe competitors. Don't be fooled by what? XYZ's prices. We've got the lowest prices in town. Mathis Brothers. They used to have the two original Mathis Brothers, did I tell you this? They were country and western singers, that's what they had. They were horrible, and so they went into selling furniture instead. Don't be fooled by the competitors' prices. And then they break into this song. We got them fire blazing prices at Mathis Brothers Furniture, Mathis French. We're now in the fourth generation of Mathis Brothers. And I'm a little concerned that they named their child after a cracker. Why the hell would you name a kid after a cracker? Weasel wording, all of those things. So any questions about changing the meaning of the word? Is weasel wording, it's a lot of equivocation. Any questions about logic and critical thinking? That, you could take an entire course in logic and critical thinking, as I told you. Certainly that's, Boolean logic and things like that are well beyond the scope of this course, but what I want you to do is to make sound, reasoned, well-written articles and responses to the essays for our purposes in here. So are there any questions about the rule book? All right, so I want you to get in your groups, and I want you to come up with the definition. You're going to answer two questions. The first question has several parts. So I want you to tell me what is justice, and provide examples, at least 3, and justify your response. Don't you hate it when professors say that? Justify. Well, I should just be able to spit it out there. And then second, so what is justice? Several parts, 3 examples, A, and B, justify. And then the second question, what in the world what does justice have to do with marketing? Why would I ask you such a stupid question?
So
So get in your groups, I'll give you, I don't know, 15 or 20 minutes to work on that. Come up with something that resembles rational, comprehensive thought. Put the names of your group members that are here on the paper. Those people that are not here, gonna suck to be them today. Who's gonna give us a really good argument? So switch group leaders. And let's have your argument. Has everybody got their arguments? Who wants to go first? Nobody wants to go first?
I'll go.
All right, come on up here. I want you to get the full effect of being the YouTube star that you are. I'm telling you, this is going to be the next reality show, right here.
We need music.
What?
We need music.
We need music? Okay, well, I'll work on the audio effects for next time. Go ahead.
So we put justice as making a wrong a right. It's fairness that is deserved. So for examples, and I hope we did this right, but like if you were to rob a bank, they should be prosecuted and face proper consequences equal to the crime committed. Another example would be if the company claims a product does something, then the company should be held responsible. And the last example relates to Enron. They misled the public by portraying a wealthy and stable company. And then as far as question number 2, so these are justice is fairness, objectivity, and honesty. These are qualities in marketing a marketeer should exhibit. Without genuine relationships, the company as a whole cannot be prosperous.
Okay, all right. So I like we've got some ideas here. Fairness, righting a wrong, I think is what you said. You said, making something right. There's some idea, you said something about proportionality. It's something about crime and punishment. And so you had something about what I'm taking as proportionality. If that's not what you all meant, then let me know. I think so there's this idea of balance and proportionality. I think that's a good idea. Honesty, I think we know what that is, and I think that's a nice idea. We'll talk about whether or not it's ethical to lie. So I like your examples. I think those were all good examples in terms of how honesty and fairness are concepts that obviously are about marketing. Marketing is, as I've said before, is the only fully integrated function of the firm, and it is a pervasive social activity that we engage in. So I think that's nice. Okay, let's see what the second group, thank you, has to. We'll let you stay on the island. Everybody think that you did a good job. So this group can stay for another day. We won't vote him off yet. We won't have tribal council and get rid of you just yet. Who wants to come up next? Discuss. Don't everybody jump. Don't everybody jump at once. You're getting lots of experience, Logan, speaking for your group.
I know.
Are there a bunch of cowards there?
No, but some people just don't come across, I guess.
Oh, okay.
We kind of said the same thing, like making a wrong right.
Okay, so we've got that here. We've got 2 for that.
Yeah. And we basically said it's kind of like peace of mind.
Okay.
Like one of our examples, like if one of your family members gets murdered and they, can't find the person who did it, and then they finally do a trial and all that, and then they finally get sentenced, so the family gets peace of mind because the killer's behind bars.
So emotional justice. Okay. You said fairness too? Okay. What were your 3 examples? You got murder.
The murder, and then if you get, someone gets caught cheating on an exam, and they cheated on you, you kind of want peace mind that.
Okay, so you got cheating, and
uh,
is cheating a victimless crime?
Victim is yourself.
The victim is yourself?
Yeah.
Well, like,
Right.
say like your answers matched up,
Uh-huh.
but you're not the one who cheated, like, so you want like peace of mind that your professor didn't think that you were cheating as well.
Okay, all right.
And
So you want the opportunity, that might go to due process, you want the opportunity to, if you're accused, be heard. All right, that's an important aspect of, I'm not sure the absolute concept of justice, but maybe the enforcement of justice, that's important, okay?
And then, third example is kind of a personal experience, but it was before the Gold's Gym opened up on Penn Memorial. But their branch manager opened my membership for me, and he said that I could work out at like Aspen and like other Golds for free until that gym was opened and done. Well, they charged me for like 6 months, and the gym still wasn't open. I didn't know that they were charging me, so I finally figured it out, and I was out like $300, and I brought it to their attention, but they wouldn't refund me the $300. So they didn't make it.
They didn't
right.
make
They
you
didn't-
whole.
Yeah, and so that's why I will never step foot in the Gold's Gym and kind of talk really bad about them.
Okay, so you gave word of mouth, that's good marketing there. I like the fact that in this day and age, one of the things that we used to say in marketing was that if you had a bad experience with a company, you might tell 10 people. If you had a really good experience, you might tell 3. Now, if you have a bad experience with a company, one of the things that we know is that you will tell everybody by, virtue of social media. You no longer have a limited amount of scope and temporal limitations to your amount of vociferous complaining that you can do. So I like that example. And what's this have to do with marketing?
Just, false advertisement, or you want to make sure that you're marketing your product correctly and morally, and just if, your company or your product messes up, you screw up, you need to make it right for your customers.
Okay, all right. So justice applies to some aspect beyond just maybe a criminal law setting. It applies to other things where we can distribute goods and services. Okay, I think that's correct. All right, very good. We'll let him stay. Let that group stay. Okay.
We want to go next. That's okay.
Just jump right
Agree on
in.
that. You would. So our first example was when someone commits a crime and goes to jail. We had extreme examples here, so like when Timothy McVeigh committed the bombings.
Mhm.
He went to jail and received a death sentence. Our second example is, let's say a person who's against Planned Parenthood, but then they find out that the only services, like say they have a disease or something, the only way they can receive those services is through Planned Parenthood, where it's affordable for them. So our justification for that would be, say that the hypocrites receive their due process for that, their due diligence.
So some idea, I think what you're saying there is karma.
Yeah, that's what we were thinking about.
Okay.
We were trying to find the right way to define karma, so we just avoided that word.
Because you didn't want to use karma?
Well, it can go 2 ways.
Okay.
It's kind of, it's not as
Alright.
easy to justify. Right, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, good meeting. So our third example was Martin Shkreli, is that how we pronounce it? Raised the price of exclusive drugs, causing more loss of business, which is an adverse effect to his business. Justification, had he only moderately increased the prices, he most likely wouldn't have lost the business that he had, and definitely his public relationships went down. And apparently he fired his defense attorneys today. So.
Okay, so I'm not sure that he actually lost business. I mean, he raised the price of that drug, something like, what,
$900?
3,000% or something? It was incredible.
But he lost business connections. And people stopped
Okay.
doing business with him. His business, but business-to-business connections went down.
Right, and other drug companies, because the interesting thing about that was this, that other drug companies, it was no longer patented. They were just the only ones that were really making it. And so he said, we're gonna use the profits from that to develop new drugs, and that was his excuse, that drugs needed to be more expensive. I don't know how much I buy that, but yeah, so there, again, that I guess is a kind of a karmic sort of retribution or distributive justice that you've got, what goes around comes around. Treat people as you want to be treated. That's often defined as the golden rule. Does the golden rule always work?
In my opinion, it's something that it could go both ways.
You don't think the golden rule always works? Treat others as you want to be treated.
There's some gray areas to a certain extent. Or some people might, there's some exceptions to that point.
Like what?
Like someone who, you're supposed to treat others kindly or be good to people around you because you want them to treat you the same way, correct? And so if someone, let's say, is a rude person, then you might, if there's an opportunity for you to do something that might be inconvenience to them, and that's like that's an open way of justice, then it might be then that might be, what do you call it? Not fair, but that'd be like an exception.
Okay, so you said if somebody does something, I think what you're saying, if I followed your logic, is that if somebody does something bad, you might treat them badly, and that would be
Justified in a sense?
justified, even though you wouldn't want to be treated that way. Is that what you're saying?
Kind of, yeah. I don't think of an example.
There's exceptions to it,
Yeah.
depending on the person.
Okay.
Well, going off like what you said, like just because you're a nice person doesn't mean other people aren't gonna be nice. Like just because you're nice to them doesn't mean they're gonna be nice to you.
All right, but should they be? I mean, the fact,
No, they
one
shouldn't.
of the things that we look at when we look at justice is not whether or not people actually engage in it. That's not really the business of determining what is just. What we're looking for is not what's occurring necessarily in actuality, but what is the perfected or the best that we can become. Does that make sense? And so we don't always see people treating others as they might wish to be treated, but that doesn't mean that necessarily we shouldn't strive for that golden rule. But there may be a problem with the golden rule itself. Now, the Jewish scholar Hillel, who lived in the 1st century, came up with a modification of the golden rule that might actually work. The problem with the golden rule, as stated positively, is that I may want things done to me that you don't want done to you. Right? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Probably not, but there are people, you know, that
Yeah.
like, huh?
I don't think it would really apply to, say, a rapist. The golden rule, I don't think that would really apply to them. It wouldn't be the same to a normal person, the meaning behind it.
Well, I mean, there are people that maybe like being abused, and they like, you know,
Yeah.
they like being, you know, degraded. There's a show on television called Devious Maids. Have any of you ever watched Devious Maids? I only know about this because my family seems to watch these shows, and they make me watch them. So one of the characters in there is, you know, he and his wife are having marital problems until she starts screaming at him and barking commands. And he apparently likes that. Most people don't want to be screamed at and have commands barked at them. They want to be free. So in the 1st century, a pagan walks up to the great Rabbi Hillel and says that he will convert to Judaism if the rabbi can recite the entire Torah to him while standing on one foot, the entire meaning of the Torah, and Hillel looks at him and says, that which is hateful unto yourself, do not unto your fellow man. That is the whole of the Bible. Go and learn it. The rest is but commentary. And so I think this is an enormously important piece of exegesis, because if you state it in the negative, it will almost always work. If you state it in that kind of way, the golden rule, if you state it negatively, it will almost always work. But there may be problems with it if you state it positively, and that, again, I may want things done to me, or you may want things done to you that other people would find abhorrent. It's probably a limited number of cases in which that is going to be so, but the possibility exists, and so I think we have to come up with maybe what is the absolute concept. Okay, all right. Do you have anything else?
We
What
have
is this? What does this have to do with marketing?
Following a scheme of ethics and avoiding misrepresentations, agree. Sorry. You wrote in
I
cursive
wrote
on
this
this
one,
one.
so, let's see. Will benefit a
Will
firm.
benefit a firm on the
firm.
whole. And then the second one that we have for that
Okay, so there's
was,
another proportionality, and there's another deserts theory, I think, sort of, in there. All right.
the second half to that would be gaining respect and trust of customers will foster beneficial returns.
Okay, so you have something here that is different than what others have come up with, as far as I can tell, in that you focus on utility. And this is really a concept that is going to be really important for us, particularly in this class, because a big portion of the way we actually judge is going to be based on utility. And it's business students love it. They love this concept, and we'll talk a lot about it, because it mirrors what? It mirrors our economic system, doesn't it? It mirrors what we tell you you should practice as business people, the maximization of utility. If you want to get a worthless degree, get a degree in economics. They rename things that we all understand intuitively with fancy terms, and the maximization of utility could be reduced to what? Well, let's get the most bang for your buck. So I think that's maybe an important concept that we'll have to think about. Okay, we have one more group. Oh, yeah, oh, wait. I noticed you're keeping the paper this time and not letting him talk, because you walked off with the paper last time.
Really left us kind of bad right there when you did that. So we said, do what's right, but we did it more, it's based on perception of an individual's ethical code. So it's, justice is different to every single person. So like our first example, we, a lot of people went with, somebody doing a crime and then getting punished, that's justice. We did somebody being wrongfully accused of a crime and being set free, basically being proven innocent, that being justice. So said like, say there's a prison inmate on death row, the family of the victim are seeing justice as him getting the death penalty, but his family who sees him as innocent do not see it as justice. So it's different for each person what justice really is. Then we said karma also. It has to do with the balance. We said what goes around comes around, and we even went with the Old Testament in the Bible saying eye for an eye, basically being justice. That, if somebody hurts me, I hurt them back, that's justice. And then Twan came up with, in the movie The Call, Halle Berry's character left the victim's kidnapper to rot in the basement tied to a chair. That being justice.
Old Testament justice.
Yeah.
You really like, and everything ever finishes that. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Not vengeance is mine, saith who? And do we really want? Do we really want to? I mean, if somebody tortures, first of all, if they do it to more than one person, you can only kill them once, can't you? There's only so many times we can kill them. And do we really want to engage in torture as a society. If there are criminals out there, at any one time, the FBI estimates that there's probably 50 to 100 serial killers existing and working in the United States. That should give you pause for concern. Almost every single day in this country, there is a mass shooting, depending on how you define the term mass shooting. Most people now are saying a mass shooting involves the shooting and death of 3 or 4 or more people. Some people say it's 3, some people say it's 4. Given that, are we willing to turn our death penalty into a retributive type system? I mean, the way we do the death penalty now, at least in theory, is that it's really about a deterrent effect in 2 respects. And the deterrent effect is that it keeps that individual ultimately from re-committing a heinous crime. But it also serves as a prophylactic deterrent effect in that people are not going to commit the crime because they're afraid of getting the death penalty. Now, studies really suggest that as a prophylactic matter, the death penalty is horribly inefficient and doesn't really work. And why is that? I think most people care if they die. I just don't think that they think they're going to get caught, or that it will apply to them. Or at the time they do it, most people are murdered by somebody they know. And so it's a crime of passion, and they don't necessarily aren't thinking rationally at that point in time. So, but for those that engage in sort of cruelty of the most vicious sort, do we want to then engage in cruelty against the perpetrator? Do we want to do that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right.
It depends on what the definition of the cruelty is. I mean, making somebody spend 40 years on death row just sitting there, that can be considered cruelty before, not immediately giving them the death penalty, but making them sit there.
I think, yeah, probably sitting in a 5x8 cell, being allowed out one hour a day might be more cruel, actually, than putting somebody.
Or if you're Oklahoma and we just botched 2 of them, and those were pretty cruel.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, let me have your papers. We'll talk about this some more. I'm out of time for today. Yeah, write your team name on there. You sure have your team name.
Yeah, it's also